First, take a look at these video clips. This is a typical reference-based generation workflow. It includes characters, props, and a scene. Sometimes it can even include two characters in the same shot. This capability comes from an official LTX LoRA called Ingredients LoRA. The idea behind it is actually very simple. First, organize your characters, props, and scenes into a single reference sheet. Then let LTX generate a video based on that sheet. It sounds great, but the official workflow does have a fairly high barrier to entry. You can't just throw a few images together and call it a reference image. And the prompt is not a normal text-to-video description either. You need to use Markdown to clearly explain every area of the reference sheet. If you casually drop in a few images and add one ordinary prompt, you'll usually get results like this. The characters get mixed together. Props shift to the wrong place, and the model starts improvising on its own. So in this video, we're not just going to run through the official workflow. I've also organized it into a reusable process, including how to build the reference sheet, how to lay out single character and two character sheets, how to handle image dimensions, and how to write the Markdown prompt. At the end of the day, it all comes down to one question. How do we make Ingredients LoRA actually understand your setup? Now, let's look at some real results. This one uses two characters, and this one uses a single character. You'll notice that the real key is not writing the fanciest prompt possible. It's clearly defining who has what and where everything belongs, so the model knows exactly how to generate the video. All right, let's quickly get familiar with the model itself. Ingredients LoRA is an IC-LoRA trained on LTX 2.3-22B. It's a LoRa for reference-based generation, but the reference image it uses is particularly interesting. It's called a reference sheet. You can put characters, props, locations, and even larger scenes into one big image. It can process multiple characters, key props, clearly defined scenes, and pretty much anything else you can think of. Its prompt structure is also very clear. We write it in two parts. The first part is called reference sheet, and it describes what is inside the reference sheet we just discussed. The second part is called generated video, which describes the actual video you want to generate. Let's take a look at the workflow it provides. To make the demo easier, I also built this workflow on Running Hub. In the ComfyUI space, Running Hub is a very capable online platform. Whenever new models and extensions appear, it follows up quickly. It also gives ComfyUI creators an online community where you can find plenty of creative inspiration and example workflows. First, remember that this is an IC-LoRA, so the overall workflow structure is an IC-LoRA setup. Let's start with model loading. There are generally two model setups we can use. The first is provided officially by ComfyUI, and it usually comes as a checkpoint model. The second uses a diffusion model provided by KJ. Here, I'm using the official ComfyUI checkpoint. So it already includes the VAE to speed up sampling. We load an acceleration LoRa afterward. Then we load our IC-LoRa, which is the Ingredients LoRa we just talked about. I set its weight directly to 1. Next comes image processing. This part may look a little complicated, but the logic is actually simple. First, upload the reference sheet, then turn it into a video with only one frame and resize its shorter side to 512 pixels. That 512 is very important because it becomes the final resolution of the generated video. Then duplicate that reference image into 241 frames, which gives us roughly 10 seconds of video. We already covered the overall prompt structure, so I won't read it word for word here. Later on, we'll go through exactly how to write it in the sampling condition section. There are two especially important nodes. The first is ebidxv, IMG to video condition, only Y. It sends the single image into the latent as an image to video condition. The second is LTX add video IC-LoRA guide. This is what controls whether the IC-LoRA takes effect. This is where Ingredients LoRA really comes into play. It receives the positive condition, negative condition, Virginia E, the latent we created earlier, and the set of reference frames we just generated. Then it combines them directly into a new sampling condition. You can think of the whole process in two simple steps. First, tell the model to start from this image. Second, tell the model that the assets inside the video should refer to these images. The sampling section itself is fairly straightforward and is very similar to the official workflow. Just remember that we're using an acceleration LoRA. So CFG is set to 1. We're also using a single stage sampling workflow with no upscale stage. That gives us the final result. Once you understand the workflow, I think most of you will be fine with it. The part that really takes time is figuring out how to make the reference sheet. Let's look at a few official reference sheets. At first, they don't seem to follow any obvious pattern, and they look quite complicated. Some characters include large facial close-ups, front views, side views, and back views. Some props are shown from multiple angles. Some scenes leave a relatively clean empty shot. There doesn't seem to be one identical template for all of them, but once we break them down, you'll find that there are not many core elements. I've summarized them into 3: characters, props, and scenes. The only real difference is that sometimes there is 1 character, and sometimes there are 2. So there's no need to build a big complicated poster every time just because that's what the official examples look like. I recommend using 2 simpler layouts. The first is for a single character. Put a close-up of the face in the upper left corner. In the upper right corner, put full body images of the same character from multiple angles. Put the key props in the lower left corner, and put a clean empty shot of the scene in the lower right corner. This layout is very easy to work with, and the results are good. The model can see the face, clothing, body type, and details from the back. The props and environment also have clearly defined positions, so they don't get crowded together with the character. The second layout is for 2 characters. It's really just a small adjustment to the first layout. In this version, don't separate each character's front view, back view, and close-up into completely separate sections. Instead, put each character into 1 reference image. Then the upper half of the sheet can contain the 2 character reference images. Each reference image should include a facial close-up as well as full body pose images from different angles. Once the layout is fixed, making the reference sheet becomes much easier. I recommend following this order. Create the main element first, which is the character, then create the props, then create the scene, and finally combine them together. I don't really recommend trying to generate the entire sheet in one go. I've tested powerful image generation models, including Nano Banana and QDouble and Idjit, and it's still hard for them to create such a complicated image perfectly in a single generation. It's better to create the parts separately and then assemble them. So how do we do that? I'll give you 2 options. The first is to use Boog, which we covered previously. Boog has 2 workflows. The first is the turbo workflow. Its turbo version produces good results and generates very quickly. The second is its edit workflow, which is what we call reference-based generation. Even though it's called edit, it can do more than edit images. It can also generate based on reference images. Another option is to use QWen image edit, which works as well. Here are the final sheets we generated. This one is for a single character, and this one is for 2 characters. They're actually very similar, with only a few changes in the upper section. Now let's talk about the Markdown prompt. Once we have the reference sheet, how should we write the prompt? As I mentioned earlier, it has a 2-part structure and uses Markdown. We've prepared a template here. In the first half, we write the reference sheet. So this section is not the actual video prompt, and it's not the story. It's simply a set of labels for the images in the sheet. For example, in the upper left corner, explain what kind of image it is. Is it a close-up? Describe the face and hairstyle. In the upper right corner, explain whether it is the same person. If it is, describe the different full body angles of that character. You also need to describe the pants, shoes, and jacket in the lower left corner. Describe the props. In the lower right corner, describe the empty scene. Here, I don't recommend vague descriptions such as a beautiful girl or a cool robot. People understand those phrases easily, but the model has no specific details it can verify. Your prompt is really there to help the model find and identify the assets it needs to use. Finally, we have the Tortstarget description. This is where you write the actual video prompt, and it's relatively simpler. In this example, we write that the character is walking through a neon street on a rainy night. A robot floats beside the character's right shoulder. The character stops and raises their right hand. The robot descends and hovers above the character's palm. Then, the camera slowly pulls back, keeping both the character and the robot in the center of the frame. Pay attention to the order here. First, introduce the subject, then explain what the subject does. Then describe the camera. Finally, describe the lighting and atmosphere. So don't begin by writing a long chain of complicated actions, such as walking, turning the head, and raising a hand. We only have a limited number of frames, so the actions should not be too complex. The official documentation also mentions that the model was trained mainly on more conventional actions. It may not handle highly complex scenes especially well. To sum it up, the most valuable part of Ingredients LoRA is not simply that it can accept multiple reference images. What it really does is allow LTX to understand a structured setup sheet. That means success depends on more than just the workflow. The way you divide up the reference sheet is also extremely important. Characters need specific identifiable features, props and scenes need to be explained separately, and the prompt needs a fixed structure. First describe the reference sheet, then describe the actual video prompt. That's all for today. Go try it yourself and follow me to become someone who truly understands AI.